Dzień dobry Państwu. Witamy Państwa bardzo serdecznie na debacie oksfordzkiej zorganizowanej przez dwie zacne uczelnie, Uniwersytet Łódzki,
Szkołę Główną Handlową.
A także mamy gości z zagranicy, ze Stockholm, Stockholm School of Economics. Witamy serdecznie studentów zagranicznych. Proszę Państwa, to jest druga już debata na EFNI. Pierwsza debata była bardzo tutaj, odbiła się dużym echem. Wtedy debatowali nasi studenci. W tym roku rozszerzyliśmy, tak jak mówiłem, o studentach zagranicznych. Debata na bardzo ważny temat. Co jest ważniejsze? Czy bezpieczeństwo militarne, czy bezpieczeństwo ekologiczne? Zobaczymy, co nasi cudowni studenci na ten temat powiedzą.
Ja tylko dodam jedną rzecz. 2016-23, jak jeździliśmy do Warszawy, to tak zawsze mieliśmy wielki baner Łódź-Warszawa, wielka sprawa i tak będzie dalej. I w tym temacie też mówimy wspólnie. Druga kwestia debaty. To jest fantastyczna rzecz, że możemy pięknie i mądrze się różnić. Także nie rywalizujemy, ale próbujmy szukać tych różnic w sposób także wyważony. I temu służy właśnie debata oksfordzka. Ja powiem tak, nie na wszystkie tematy jest łatwo rozmawiać i w takiej debacie nie wiem, jak byśmy się odnaleźli, gdybyśmy musieli teraz przedstawić stronę konflikt na Bliskim Wschodzie i stronę izraelską i palestyńską. Tam, gdzie jest śmierć, tam, gdzie jest emocje, pewnie jest trudny. Nikt pewnie nie podjąłby się z nas tutaj udziału w debacie Rosja versus Ukraina. Myślę, że ten temat by nie zaistniał. Jeszcze są większe emocje. W naszej debacie obecnie śmierć jest na razie odłożona, ale to nie znaczy, że mamy być obojętni, bo przyszłość jest nieodgadniona i musimy mieć tą wrażliwość. And I would like to thank very much the students, participants from Stockholm School of Economics. Thank you very much for joining. Sweden is always associated with peace, both with peace, but also with environmental protection. So your participants is very, very valuable for our students. So thank you very much for joining in our debate. Thanks. Thanks again.
Życzymy dobrej debaty, niech zwyciężą racjonalne argumenty. Dziękujemy bardzo.
Okay, so welcome to our debates. My name is David Bednarczyk. The other marshal of the debates is Małgorzata Niedźwiedź, and today we are debating the motion on which is more important, either environmental security or military security. These are hot topics, as was already mentioned, hence we won't go into too much of an introduction. However, I'd like to welcome the active participants of the debates, starting from the side of opposition, since I'm from the university that side proposition is from. First of all, the first speaker is Felicia from Stockholm School of Economics. The second speaker will be Marcin from the University of Łódź, Tristan from SSE, and once again Piotr from the University of Łódź. Whilst the side of proposition is filled by the ranks of, as first speaker, Emily, second speaker, Krzysztof, Jacob as the third speaker, and the fourth speaker, Harren. So our debaters today are students of various subjects, from international policy through politology onto finance and economics. Therefore, let's hope that this debate will be as meritocratic as possible. And I'd like to welcome the first speaker of side proposition to start the argumentation process. Thank you.
Before I begin, I just want to thank the audience for being here today and being a part of this debate with us. So today we will be debating the following thesis: military policy should take priority over environmental policy in the face of contemporary threats. For the sake of clarity, we will be providing definitions to 4 key terms. And the first one is Western countries. We are defining Western countries as the European members of the OECD. And second term that we will be defining is contemporary threats. We are defining them as sources of instability beyond military and environmental sectors in the next few years, such as the cybersecurity or immigration crisis. Third definition is antagonists of Western European countries. And they are essentially entities that endanger us, the Western countries. And they are Russia and terrorist non-state organizations. And finally, we will be defining hybrid war, which is a new type of conflict which refers to warlike actions taken to demoralize a population and destabilize a state in preparation of full-scale armed combat. So why does this debate even matter? We would love to prioritize both environmental security policies and military security policies, but we simply don't have the resources to do that. Given the scarcity of resources, we have to prioritize. And as the affirmative side in this debate, we strongly believe that military security policies must take priority. And that's really not a brainer. It is a no-brainer because, I mean, we see all around us the conflicts that are happening in the world, right? Ukraine, for the past 2.5 years, has been under attack by Russia, and the Middle East continues to see military conflicts between not just Israel and Hamas, but also between terrorist non-state actors. And these conflicts, just to name a few, has displaced and killed hundreds and thousands of people. Many of them are innocent children. Schools have been bombed and hospitals have been raided, and many of these people have seen their families get killed right in front of their own eyes. So it's really no surprise that these tragedies are very urgent and they're very relevant, and we have to do something about it. I acknowledge, though, that not any of these conflicts are happening right now in Poland, but they're also not happening far away, right? We don't know how these conflicts will turn out, but we can say that to avoid it coming into the borders of Poland, we have to prioritize military policies over environmental ones to make sure that they don't end up here. And the hard reality is the future of international relations and geopolitics is very, very uncertain. And the Western countries must prepare for a shifting world order in which they are not weak to foreign antagonizers. The winner of today's debate will be the one that convinces you whether environmental or military dangers present a bigger threat. The burden of proof is also on the successful demonstration of which is more immediate and whether or not prioritizing in these sectors provide the most overall net benefit. And we will be proving that to you with 2 main points and 2 lenses. And the first is direct military security, and the second is social political threats. Thank you.
Now, please, the first speaker of side opposition, take the podium.
Thank you for the first speaker in the other team. Dear marshals, and audience and opponents, we stand here today in a firm opposition to the motion that military security should take priority over environmental security in the face of contemporary threats. According to Science Direct, environmental security means protecting us of natural environment and vital interests of citizens, society, and the state from internal and external impacts, adverse processes, and trends in the development that threaten human health, biodiversity, sustainable functioning of ecosystems, and survival of humankind. We fully acknowledge that military security is crucial. However, we must reject the notion that prioritizing military security over environmental security can address the most pressing threats we face today. This framing is a false dichotomy. The world is currently grappling with environmental crises that pose far-reaching consequences, including but not limited to climate change, biodiversity loss, and natural resources scarcity. All of these fuel conflicts, destabilize nations, and threaten global peace. In fact, environmental issues are some of the main drivers of contemporary conflicts. Even the former president of the United States, Theodore Teddy Roosevelt, who was also a colonel in the US Army, emphasized the importance of environmental security. I would like to use a quote from him: "To waste, to destroy our natural resources, to skin and exhaust the land instead of using it to increase its usefulness will result in undermining in the days of our children the very prosperity which we ought by right hand out to them, amplified and developed." We will argue the following points. Number one, environmental issues have a tipping point which we cannot allow to be surpassed. Number two, a lack of focus on environmental policy will lead to mass displacement. Number three, greater focus on environmental policy allows for better international cooperation. Moving on to our first argument, we believe that we cannot allow the environment to pass the tipping point because of irreversibility of damage and its long-term impacts. A tipping point is a crucial threshold. When crossed, will lead to a large, accelerating and often irreversible changes in the climate system. Tipping points are such as melting ice caps, ocean acidity, or the destruction of vital ecosystems, create self-reinforcing circles that further exacerbate damage. Once triggered, these effects are often irreversible within human timescales, which means that we lose the ability to mitigate them effectively. Therefore, we must stand for environmental security because it also stands for the future. Very proud to oppose. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite the second speaker of side proposition.
Dear marshals, dear opposing team, dear audience. As first speaker from our side mentioned, we'll focus on two main areas. The first area is the direct military security, and the second one is socio-economical side effects of these policies. I'd like to start with the most important one, so direct military security. Russia is a threat. Right now, we can see war in Ukraine. Jacek Siewiera, head of National Security Bureau, said, if war is to be avoided, NATO eastern flank should adopt short-term, 3-year plan to avoid and prepare for confrontation. That means that that threat is not only imaginary, it's real, and we should prepare for that. And it might be avoided, so it comply with our contemporary threat definition, so we can go as such. In this case, if we have this conflict, we don't confront the needs of the military security, the two main consequences would be, of course, Russian invasion of weak countries in eastern flank of NATO will cause war. The risk of losing independence that for Polish people is so important. And also, what is even more important, we will lose so many lives in those conflicts. The second thing that would happen is no option to implement any of the environmental policies. Russia right now is a big petrol station. They export oil. They are not sustainable economy. They don't care about environment. And if we stop to exist as a sovereign nation, we won't be able to impose, to create the sustainable economy that we need to not reach the ticking point, like you mentioned. The second part of our argumentation would be on the side of side effects. Investment in military security, military industry creates big amount of jobs. They are not only simple jobs, they are high quality specialists needed, high technology, big amount of capital, it's technological advancement. And from history we can see that the technology is then transferred to the civilian economy, and then we can benefit from that. For example, GPS, internet, atomic research. Right now, for example, we can give an example that Estonia was cyber attacked in 2007 and the whole banking system was shut down. If we invest in military security, that is also cyber security, we'll be able to fight with those attacks and make the civilian lives better and don't have to suffer from, for example, shutdown of banking system. Also, Frontex is right now using GPS system to monitor Mediterranean Sea, to help people cross it, to help immigrants get to Europe, so they don't die. We, as a Western society, we value life the most. It's very important for in our values. Also, the other side is the rise of populism. Right now in Europe, we have many parties in basically all countries that rise on the notion of three main movements. So lack of identity, socio-economical problems, and also the lack of purpose in life. So mainly young male are voting for those parties, and we as an affirmative side, we strongly believe that prioritization of the military industry will create a purpose, because those people can work in the military industry or serve in the army, also create the better socio-economical situation, because the army and the industry is the best equalizer in many cases, and also will decrease the popularity of those movements all across Europe. So therefore, in 2 or 4, 5, 6 years, there won't be populist parties in charge of very important nations that shape the international life and the relations between countries. We, as an affirmative side, to sum up, strongly believe that solving military security problems, prioritization of military security, will not only solve the direct causes that are forcing us to arm, to create strong industry, but also will fix the economy, will fix the society, and give us better life in the future through the transfer of technology or improvement of general life. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the second speaker of side proposition, and I'd like to invite the second speaker of side opposition to take the stand.
Ladies, gentlemen, esteemed speakers, marshals, it's a pleasure to be here. Allow me to begin by building upon what the first speaker from our group said. Military threats, while immediate and significant, tend to be more reversible, with the obvious exemption and the unfortunate exception of the loss of human life. Wars can end through diplomacy, conflict resolution, or regime change. Economies can be rebuilt, alliances reshaped, and even heavily damaged regions can recover from conflict. However, it is critical that to understand that if environmental systems collapse, certain environmental systems, the damage is not only long-lasting, it's irreversible, permanent, and it's a consequence for future generations. Therefore, it is important to understand that the environmental degradation process is an existential risk to all of us as a whole. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and the harm to human societies by endangering food security and creating economic instability are very real threats that will last and persist if environmental security is not focused on. The destabilization caused by environmental crises may cause exacerbated inequality, weakness of social cohesion, and fuel conflicts, including those over scarce resources like water and arable land. Moving on the other hand, military conflicts, while devastating, typically affect specific regions. There are exceptions, of course, granted, but they often leave the broader global system intact. Climate threats have a broader potential to cause global disruption, and even most well-equipped militaries cannot control and will not be able to exert control over these crises. Moving on, it is crucial to note that the far-reaching consequences of climate-related displacement. Consider that, according to the 2021 Global Report on International Displacement, around 30.7 million people were displaced by environmental disasters, which is nearly 3 times as much as people displaced by military conflicts. In more recent data, the 2024 report says that 26.5 million people were displaced by natural disasters in 2023, compared to 20.5 million displaced by conflicts. Now, this gap is closer than the one seen in 2022. But there's one important piece of context that must be understood, and this is the fact that climate-related displacement is still higher in spite of the fact that global figures of conflict displacement are 70% higher than the annual average over the past decade, which means that in spite of this increase of conflict-related displacement, environmental displacement still takes priority. And these displacements lead to many humanitarian crises. Not only can they cause a loss of economic productivity in the affected area, but they also put immense strain on the hosts of these displaced peoples. Displaced populations arrive with few assets, which can increase their reliance on public assistance programs. The host countries may not be able to provide adequate housing, healthcare, and resources to these displaced peoples. A sudden influx of population has the potential to overwhelm a local infrastructure and cause massive crises in areas to which these displaced people will eventually migrate, causing both economic and social damage, which is a very serious consequence. Also, at least maybe on a more positive note, it's important to note that beyond just addressing the root causes of instability in international cooperation on environmental issues, cooperation on environmental issues is a proven path to cooperation and strengthening global security. Environmental policy presents unique opportunities for collaboration among nations, more so than military policy ever could. Shared environmental challenges, such as managing transboundary water resources or reducing carbon emissions, compel countries to work together, fostering trust and reducing the likelihood of conflict. Consider the Paris Agreement. This monumental accord brought nearly 200 nations, including major military powers like the United States and China, together to combat climate change. While these nations may have been opposed and have had competing military and economic interests, they found common ground on the existential threat posed by global warming and climate change. Cooperation through environmental policy does more than just preserve ecosystems, it builds diplomatic bridges, promoting peace and stability. Now, in fact, a 2022 study published by the Global Environmental Change Fund, the Global Environmental Change, found that international environmental agreements reduce the likelihood.
Your time.
My bad. Well, thank you.
Thank you. So now the third speaker of side proposition.
Thank you very much. So to begin with, the opposing side talks about the contemporary issues that are striking our globe. Now, the thesis defines that this is a debate about Western Europe. And in this region, there is no such things at that level. So you do not have these big tsunamis. You do not have this big global displacement of people. And then you also have the fact that they do talk about the environment and these issues taking some sort of precedence over defense and wars. Now, in the region that we are in, this simply isn't true. If you look at Poland has 1.5 million people from Ukraine, and there's a war happening just at the border of Ukraine and Russia. Now, you can, of course, talk about the climate, and it is a big issue, and I do acknowledge that there is importance, but you do also have to talk about the fact that a war happening does have more detrimental effects to the people in that region and also globally. You say that they're usually issues that are kept regionally, but that also simply isn't true. Look at Russia and Ukraine as the big and current example. The effect that had on energy prices, for example, that was felt in the whole European region. You had gas going up, energy going up, all those prices went up, and that had horrible effects on the economies of the whole region. And the defense investments, they also do help in combating this. So you invest in your defense, you invest in the production, you invest in all these things, and that is an economic driver as well. Now, secondly, you talk about the displacement. Yes, it is a fact that people are displaced by crises, but the fact is also that they usually come back. If you look at, for example, Florida and the US, people are going because of the hurricanes that are happening there right now, but in almost all cases, they're going to go back to their homes and rebuild. When you have a war, that is very difficult. If you have nuke drops, for example, that's very, very difficult to rebuild, and that place basically becomes uninhabitable. So even if you have larger numbers of people escaping because of crises, this isn't a permanent issue. They might need housing for a couple of weeks, a month, a year, but it's not a thing that's permanent. But in Europe, you have so many people that are coming from the Middle East, from the Balkans, and the wars that happened there, and now they live permanently. So combat does lead to issues that are more long-lasting, and it does lead to issues that are more permanent and that do cost more for these societies. And thirdly, you talk about international cooperation, and you specifically mention the Paris Agreement, and I believe that is flawed, because if you look at the agreement, all that has done is basically to antagonize the states who are doing a lot, and it then leads to them having to do even more. Looking at the term specifically, for example, you have China. Their term in the agreement and the promise they made is that they will stop polluting. Not stopping, they're going to stop increasing their levels of pollution in the year 2050. But then you also have places like the UK, like Sweden, like the US, that have promised to be carbon neutral by 2050. So it's this difference in the pledges, and in many cases it leads to good states that are for our interest, them being antagonized and them not having these benefits. But then you have China, who's allowed to pollute, and they can increase doing these bad things. So yes, there is cooperation, but the issue lies in that changing pollution isn't in these places. That's not of their interest, and they're also not going to have proper pledges. Thank you.
So now the third speaker of side opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm come from Vietnam. So I'm share the very pain when the floor hit Poland, just like how the typhoon hit my country. But I also share the pain of Ukrainians when they lost their house due to war, as my country also go through that in the past decade. It's important that we recognize the threat that we are facing is detrimental to people, and we ought to find a way to solve that. We in opposition tell you it's so important that we prioritize environment policy in order to have these problems solved for the people. I think it's important to emphasize that we here in Europe have so much of innovation, so much of collaboration, so much of resources that we need to put into the fight of climate change because people and global community need our hand in this battle, right? But first, before moving on, telling you on why environment policy should be prioritized, I want to address the case brought by the proposition. I think it's very important to understand whether it's like war of Ukraine and Russia or whether it's climate change that hit every single one of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from. Is it a harm that every single individual have to face? It's going to be the death of a soldier on the battlefield, but people also lost their life due to heat wave. If we think about elderly, people also here in Poland going to lose their livelihood and lose their house and property at the same way that poor Ukraine when the flood hit them, right? Therefore, it's so hard to measure on the harm that people have to face because every single harm of us is a loss that we have to face. Therefore, we don't think this debate should be on that metric of whether which harm going to create the more from the cost, right? Every harm is a harm. But what is important is that proposition never addressed or never told us why investing in military going to solve conflict, going to create less war, right? Because if we think about the war between Ukraine and Russia, the more you invest in military, the more you have weapons, we're escalating effect. Depend on everyone. And we on opposition think that mediation, international mediation and cooperation and negotiation is the thing that we need to have in order to solve the conflict. But the more you invest in military, the less focus you have on that. And we think this is the harm that our proposition going to have to face and going to make every single one of us face that problems, right? So therefore, it's so incredibly important that we need to take into account that environment should be prioritized. Why I'm saying so? Because I think that future generation should not and they must not bear the harms that we as current generation crave for them, right? Felicia and Martin emphasized on something so important I don't think proposition yet to respond. Because that climate change has a tipping point. And the idea is that once we cross that line, the climate will never go back. Our future generation, they have to pay every single harm that we create, that they did not have any responsibility on that. But they themselves, even if they want to fix the problem, they won't be able to do so. If we now do not take action, if we now do not prioritize the environment over military, right? Because conflicts can always be solved by talking, by communication. There's different other means for us to solve that as human beings and as a humankind, because we all know how important peace is. But environment is unique in this point that we need cooperation, that we need collaboration between countries. That's why we have EU Union become so incredibly important in the fight, right? Therefore, if we take into account that, we think the environment should be prioritized because two major reasons. A, they have generational effect. The thing that we bear today going to be faced by our children, but it's going to escalating over time because if we see what has happened in this day, there's really weird climate change that happened. We see Sahara's desert become flooding. We see the flood that hit Poland. It's not something normal to happen, right? This means that this is going to be escalating effect that our generation is going to face, and it's so important that we're going to take into account, and we need to have the battle against that, right? But secondly, more importantly, oftentimes climate change have international effect rather than regional effect. I cannot read the proposition. There's a different level of effect coming from war, but more universal thinking about that, we know the environment going to hit every single one of us. Therefore, we need to fight against that. I think at the end of the day, there are different threats that we have to face. There are different consequences that we have to take into account, but priorities must be made, and we on opposition say environment should be the one because we as humans should live in peace together, and we can all create that, but environment need to fight of every single one of us. It needs collaboration, it needs help, and therefore we must protect us, protect future generation, and protect this planet Earth that for all to live. I'm so proud to oppose.
Thank you very much to the third speaker of side opposition, and now the final statements of side's proposition before we get into the Q&A session. So please slowly start to get some questions ready. Please take the floor.
Yeah. So now is the first speech, then there is
yes, the fourth speech, then the questions.
Okay. So, dear guests, my colleagues, I'm really happy to talk with you. My role is to sum up both sides and both arguments. If you want to have a peace, prepare for a war. This is my answer for the third speaker. So if we want to avoid the war, we must buy military stuff. Russia, as it was stated, care only about power. They attacked Ukraine because they thought that they can win. So there is no point in escalating. Moreover, just to sum up what we were talking about, we defined Western countries, we defined contemporary threats, environmental, military, and other threats, which will be in the near future. In the next few years, we're not talking about 50 years. This is the problem with the definition that the opposition gave us. They talk about the future, and the thesis is strictly about contemporary threats, which will be in the next few years, not 20 years. So this is the false assumption. Then we said, who are the antagonists of the West? Russia and the non-state terrorist organization, and then we stated what is the hybrid war. We say that we must prioritize because we cannot solve all the problems at the same time. Based on those assumptions, our team shows which threats are bigger, are more immediate, and how many more other threats we can address. We focus on two areas: direct military security and positive second and third and other effects. The opposition side talked about environmental ticking point, which they didn't say when is it. They weren't specified because we think that they were scared about the thesis, which is the contemporary threat. They only say about now, they say about future, about now, they say about taking point, but they didn't answer the question when. We say specifically, Jacek Siewiera said, it's 3 years, which is exactly as our definition states. Opposition didn't say that. They want to avoid this. Then, mass disposals. Our argumentations is only about Western Europe, not the whole globe. Again, opposition tries to make false assumption. We are not talking about the mass displacements in Africa. In Asia, we talk about the potential mass displacements in Europe, and they happened. Ukraine is the perfect example. We only talk about Western Europe, not the whole world. Again, it was stated in the thesis. And our solutions says that if we want to avoid those things, we must prioritize military policy, because if not, Russia attacks us. And if Russia attacks us, we'll have war, we'll have migrants in Western Europe, not the whole globe, and Russia, as a country who doesn't care about environmental politics, given that they invited Poland, God forbid, Baltic states, Romania, we won't be able to implement environmental politics because Russia don't implement them in their country. So our argument shows that without prioritizing military security, you won't be able to implement your environmental security, which is important. We want to imply them, but we must be safe, we must be independent country. Then we address the problem that we can give the solutions for the civilian economy. Many times, military technologies help the banking system, the GPS, and so on. So investing in military securities will help the private sector. And also, we will try to get rid of the problem of the populists. The young males, they are unemployed, they don't have purpose, and giving them opportunity work as a patriot, as a soldier, and work in military, we will solve these problems, and the opposition didn't say about this. So we answered those three questions. What is the big threat? We showed that our prioritization solves the bigger threat. Our problems are immediate, not the long way. They're in 3 years, not in 20 years, which is exactly what was in the thesis. And the third thing, which was about solving other problems, we answered them. We showed that we can not only answer the problems about military and potentially then let you do something with environment, but we also have the civilian economy. That's why by addressing all of those problems, we showed that our argumentation and our proposition won, and we should prioritize military security over the environmental security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sides proposition. Now the last speech of side opposition. Please synthesize the debates for us.
Hello, is it working? Yes, okay. So I've got the pleasure that I'm the last speaker of our team, opposition of the sentence that military policy should take priority over environmental policy in the face of contemporary threats. And first of all, you said when we want to fight for this environmental security. Right now, because we are living in this right now, and we are looking to the future. So coming back to the point, dear marshals, dear members of audience, dear rectors, and members of the proposition, I'm here to affirm that we are opposite side of the, no, here, we've got the opposite side of the sentence military policy should take priority over environmental policy in the face of contemporary idea. And today we've discussed two very important visions of security, military security and environmental security. And it's undeniable that both of them are very important. But we cannot have military security without good environment, and we have to create good environment. And if we want to create this in the good level, we have to environmental security. And also military security played a big role, the most important role for the centuries. But in the recent years, we've got a lot of crises caused by environment, and the debate has focused on environment security. And also environment is not only about the environment, but also about interest of our citizens, society, the state, and also about our biodiversity, ecosystems, and the whole survival of humankind. And to reiterate the arguments of my team, first of all, the effects of the wars, the effects of military threats are unreversible, which means we can rebuild our nations after the war. We can rebuild economy after the war. We can rebuild this by invest in our countries, in our societies. But we cannot rebuild our environment. So this is very important. It's been said that Russia is a threat to Europe. It's correct, but we've got also proxy wars. We've got also new types of wars, of conflicts. Russia is using, for example, environment for threatening Europe. So this is not only about military. So we are giving tool to Russia because we don't care about environment. We are we should take care of this, also take care of military. But don't give tools to Russia if we don't care about environment. And also Russia uses environment as a threat and tool. For example, the sources, the gas, the petrol, everything is used in the new type of war. The third one was that international agreement focused on environment causes a global stability because everyone is involved. Europe is involved, Africa, we are talking about Africa, about also mass migration. You said that we are not talking about mass migration in Africa, but we also got mass migration in Europe. From, for example, Russia uses this process, so it's a threat also for Europe. And the last thing is that we can solve and address military problems and threat by diplomacy, by agreements, by other stuff, not only military, not only soldiers or preparing for war, not. I think that we think together that diplomacy is also the tool. And we are in the forum, European Forum of New Ideas. So we are looking at the future. We don't have to look only for our country, only for our continent, because it's so Euro-centric point of view. we have to look more far away than our country, continent, times, generation. We don't have to look, we don't have time to look only for military aspects. And we will not be able to create a good military without good environment. So we have to look into the future and looking for a new aspects of security. This new aspect is environment security. And also it's been said that that if you want to win a war, if you want peace, prepare for a war. But we can prepare only for war which we know. We don't know the future wars. So we are preparing for war we know before. The new threat is environmental security and how countries use the environment to destabilize a situation over the world and Europe. So we have to prepare to build good environment, and then we have built also good military. And thank you so much for being here and listening us. And I hope that we create good environment to this debate. And it was so.
Thanks, the fourth speaker of the opposite team. Welcome. Now we will switch to part that you audience can take part in. Please allow me to stay seated. We will start the Q&A session. I hope you enjoyed the speeches of our debaters. I can feel the energy, I can feel the determination. They did a great job. I think you can allow the round of applause for that. But before you can ask your questions, we will give you like this small warm-up, and the proposition team will be allowed for the one question to the opposite team. You can sit.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. I will ask the question. So, in connection to the military dangers and the potential future wars, which we can expect, as Maciek Siewiera said, in maybe next 3 years. So, given that Russia attacks others when they think that they are weak, and Russia doesn't care about sustainable economy, how can you implement environmentally friendly policies in a country which is conquered by Russia? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. I think there should be clear on what we are thinking about, because obviously countries, especially countries in Europe, do have the capacity to defend themselves, and we all have the support of different organizations and structure systems that we're currently building here. So it's not the trade-off that once we invest in the environment, we have zero in our military, right? But it's about the prioritization that we need to think about. So I think in that aspect, then it's up to proposition then to toward why it's so crucial that we need to invest a lot and invest even more than the environment to the military, right? So in that aspect, I do think that we still can protect ourselves if the war happens. That's the first thing to say. But second thing I also want to address, it's very, I think, universal to say that Russia created a war because they know that they can conquer another country and they think other country is weak. It's hard to know their true intention, especially from Putin government on what they want. But there are also another proposal to the idea of that probably because Russia know they have the control over the resource, over the oil that the European continent depend on. Therefore, they know that they have the upper hand in the war, and that's why they decide to make their political statement through the war, right? So if we think about it in that aspect, it's so important that we take care of our environment, make sure that we have the ideas of environment security, because from that, we can have a resource that we need and we can be more independent, which on the other hand, going to enhance our ability to have a say in political sphere. So that's what's important from our position. Thank you.
Thank you. And the opposite team, do you have a question?
Does this work? Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I have a question to the fourth speaker of the proposition. First things first, fantastic statement, absolutely loved it. You tore us a new one. But my question is, you made a big point out of us focusing on, the environment on a global scale and not focusing on Western Europe. But do you think that the interests and the best interests of Western Europe are focused only on limiting itself to that one geographic area? Or do you think there is perhaps a vested interest in focusing on it on a more global scale? Or should we just be isolationist?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, you have a point. This is important for Europe, but as it was said in the debate and your definition, we have scarce resources. We cannot do everything at the same time. We must prioritize. And our thesis is like that. If Russia attacks us, for example, Poland, Romania, Baltics, and so on, we wouldn't be able to implement any environmental friendly society policies because Russia doesn't care. They care only about money and power. They don't care about environment. So my answer for you is yes, we should care, but first things first. First, we must be sure that we'll be independent, that Russia wouldn't attack us, and then we can think about the next step. Okay? So first us, then the globe. This is common between us people. We as a people, we first think about family, then we think about our whole country, the same as Europe. First, we must think about us, then we can go to the global scale. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I see that we have our help ready with the questions and microphones. Do we have a question on the audience? Please raise. Oh. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a former debater, so it was very, very great to hear you all today. Thank you for that. My question is going to be to the proposition side, and I very much get the point that you made about them not pointing out the timing issue. That's very good. But I really wanted to ask you about the theory ahead about how we need to prepare for war if we want to have peace. So my question is, when and how are we going to make it stop? Because you're going to be closed in a loop. We're going to invest in more weapons. They are going to invest in more weapons. And then we're just going to be doing it on and on and on again until, you know, the very end of days. So how and when? Thank you.
So if I may, okay, yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, sorry, I speak a lot. That's, yeah, I love it, I'll be honest. So, when I think about your question, my answer will be a little bit economic, from the economical side of view. I read the Why Nations Fail from Acemoglu. He says about certain economies and about why certain nations are more prosperous than others. And why I said it, because your question reminded me Cold War. So, during the Cold War, we had the same situation. Both sides wanted to avoid the war, but Soviets actually wanted to wage a war, but they couldn't because they felt threatened. Okay, it would be, and I think it's just the future, just the fact. If you want to avoid the war, we must do, let's say, Cold War between Western Europe and Russia. And to answer your question, when and why, when will it end? Well, it will end in the same moment when the Soviets collapsed. We, as the Western countries, we have better economies, we have better institutions, which was, and Acemoglu wrote about this in his book. He got the Nobel Prize recently. And Russia does not. They are ineffective. And in one moment, they will just collapse, as they did in the past. So, and the problem also is that if we will not arm, then they will attack us as they attack the Ukraine. So there are two scenarios. If we don't arm, we will be attacked and we will not able to implement any environmental policies. But if we arm and we prioritize, we avoid those risks. And then after the economic collapse, we'll be free to do whatever policies which are not about military stuff. We will be free to do that. Yeah. So thank you very much.
May I add one sentence? So, like the second part of your question, when to stop? Basically, if we jumped on the other level of the military advancement and the gap between Russia and Western Europe is so big, then our relative spending will be way, way smaller. So therefore, we'll have more space to make environmental policies, and so on. Let's look at United States. They have the strongest military in the world. They can now focus on environmental stuff, on the socio-economical problems more than on military, because their air force is the best in the world. Actually, they have like the strongest air force in the world is US, I think, Navy Air Force, and then you have Land Air Force. They have two separate places in the ranking of the strongest air forces. They are so strong military that Russia can't attack USA, so they are a strong player internationally. They can put attention on some things they want to achieve on the international level, and also their spending, it's not that big relative to Europe, because if we look on the percentage of GDP, it's okay, it's like standardized. It should be standardized among NATO, but the amount of money you spend is actually bigger in bigger economies. And then, therefore, their budget is also bigger, and we can not stop completely, but the fraction of our expenditure will be way slower. It will be smaller, not that important, and we can invest in helping the society in like the priority, but not in contemporary situation, like right now in 5 years, but in 20, 10 years, it will be way more suitable to focus more on society than on military, because we'll be secured. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a question for the maybe opposite side?
No. No.
Okay.
So thank you so much. And I have a question for you guys. You are talking about the economical reasons, of course. So that's why I would like to ask for your idea for the budget, and how would you like to care for costs of effects, for example, flood or droughts that are happening right now. We don't need to wait for them, so there is no time scale. It's happening right now in Poland. So how would you like to address these issues if you will not have any money for this, because you want to decide actually to put money for the military systems? So where will you find money if war will not happen? Thank you.
So, okay, so where will the money come from? So, from my perspective, there are plenty opportunities. We can, of course, take a debt and have a bigger debt, and then we can pay for it. But it's not really maybe the best solution. But like with the growth of our economy, we naturally have more money in our budget. So one answer is we can wait, and with every year we'll have more money. Okay, but maybe not so, we cannot wait actually. So we must understand one thing. We live in a harsh world. In harsh world we must choose better or worse options. Right now, the alternative of not paying for our army is paying for Russian economy in 3 years. So my answer is, unfortunately, we'll have to probably cut certain projects. Maybe we will not be able to pay for other projects, but I want all of you to think about the alternative. Because we are in a serious serious conference, and we cannot say to us like fairy tales, like we can do whatever we want. We live in the other planet. So unfortunately, we'll have to make some harsh decisions, and we have to pay because, as I've said, alternative is way worse. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do make a good point. Yes, it is expensive. But you also have to look at the fact that war is a lot more costly than arming your country. At the current moment, Poland is, I think, in the top of NATO in how much they spend in respect to GDP on their defense. But compare that to Ukraine, their GDP has dropped by 30%. Investing in your army is an investment, actually. It's an investment for your country, and it's a lot better for your economy to have a strong army. That does cost a lot of money, but it is very much preferable to have Russia be scared of you, and the consequence, if they do attack you, then say, yeah, it's fine, let's attack them, and then that's detrimental. you can't do anything during a war. And it's also the fact that when you do have a strong defense, you have economic confidence. That drives investment. That is good for the economy in and of itself. There's not much activity happening in Ukraine's economy, for example, because there is this great uncertainty. So having a strong confidence in the security of your country, in the security of the investments that happen in this country is preferable, even though it does cost money, of course. And like you said, you will have to prioritize. Some things might be cut, some parts of the budget might be cut, but it is a guarantee. And there's also the fact that many things when investing in your army are one-time costs. So you buy a plane, you buy a ship, you buy the things, but you buy them once and then there's maintenance, of course, but it's not as big of a cost. A war is continuous. You always have to pay for more and more and more because things get destroyed, people get killed, there's just more costs. So it is preferable to invest lots, of course, because there are big costs in your defense, but still, the bottom line is still much, much, much less than if you are to wage a war and be in armed conflict. Thank you.
And just adding on to how it also relates to the environment as well, costs, especially like investing in the military sector, we're essentially using it as deterrence, right? We're preventing and we're reducing the chance of war actually breaking out. If we're so focused on implementing more environmental sort of like projects now, and a war happens, then all of that fruit is destroyed, right? And then we're going to have to rebuild the country, and that's going to be even more costly. So I think being able to prioritize the military sector is very important, and it's more sustainable and long-lasting.
Thank you. But as I also believe our proposition side is very great speakers, but can we have a question for this side, for proposition side, to balance things out? We have a question right here.
Guys, are you ready, both sides, to meet together to find a better strategy for our military security and environmental security in the same time? Because I feel that you feel that we can't share both ideas. So could you meet again and propose for the next meeting better proposition?
It could be a bit hard through the debate format, but...
Can I answer the question? Okay, so as I said in my closing speech, there is undeniable that they are both very important. And I think that both teams agree that it's so important to care of military security and about environmental security. But I think also that if we want to, you said, I don't remember who, but someone from the proposition said that we said that we can rebuild the towns, the economy after the war, but if environment will be bad, after the war, we still got place to rebuild our economy. We still got the place to rebuild our cities, our infrastructure. But when the environment is bad, when there is a mass migration from these places where we cannot live anymore, there is no place to rebuild. So I think that we care about environment equally with the military security. But when we've got good environment, then we can care about military security. So I don't know if that's the answer for your question, but I think it's yeah, thank you.
I will also tell as debaters, on the purpose of the debate, we leave our own beliefs outside, and we can basically do the both sides. We can just change our mind because we decided who is taking what part here. But in sports format, you just flip a coin and you know what side you have. You are prepared for both sides. And it's very important debate because in this type of thesis, it's not like we only should use 100% on our budget on military or 100% on the environmental security, but it's like 51% and 49%, so the priority, what is more. And what is more, very important, that it's like not that possible on the debate to state the exact solutions in a certain field for every dollar you spend. So basically in this thesis, it's not like they would like only to care about environment and don't spend anything on military, and opposite on our side, but it's like we spend, let's say, more on military, they spend more on environment. So in both words we present to you, there is care about environment and there is care about military security, in both words. But the emphasis in the thesis is on the balance. So basically, we should have some real experts about spending money on environment and spending money in military to discuss what we should do with that money, but also there should be the debate how much money should be there. So it's a real discussion, because, for example, I'm not into science connected to environment, I'm into economics, but I know that there are some experts that will solve the problem. We just have to give them funding and give them the opportunity to do so. But if there is no funding, then there is no problem fixed. And also, we have specialists in military. Right now, there was a conference last month announcing that we'll have another factory of ammunition in Poland for the artillery shells that will almost multiply by 7 our capabilities of production, because right now maximum production is like 30,000 a year, and this single factory will be around 200,000 a year of shells. So it's big increase, but probably we should, like they started some time ago, but maybe right now we already should have such a factory.
Thank you. Do we have more questions?
Thank you very much. It's a very exciting debate. I have a question to the environment team. The right for healthy and a safe environment is a part of human rights now, and it has been recently adopted by the UN and by the Council of Europe. And there is a current discussion in Europe and in the world on criminalizing ecocide. What is your opinion? Because it's also about economics, it's about revenues, which can possibly come from the criminalizing ecocide. So how do you think, is it possible to criminalize it in Europe, to adopt it as an article in the criminal code? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer. Okay, I'm gonna answer this because I'm personally also writing about human rights in my academic field, so I feel like I can tell more about this. So it's also a very important issue, ecocide, today, and if Europe will implement this to punish someone or some organization to doing ecocide, I think yes, because European Union especially is very progressive organization and looking in the future. As I said, we are on the European Forum of New Ideas, so Europe is like a hub for the future, and I think that Europe is looking for future and also fighting for human rights in every aspect. And I think that we're just discovering new aspects of human rights, because maybe 50 years ago it was like only civil rights, or I don't know, basic rights, for example, right to opinion, right to etc. And now we are going into more, and I think it's possible to implement the law like this. Not maybe recently, but maybe in 20 years or something like this. But I think we also need a coordinated cooperation all around the world. But I don't know if the United Nations will do this, maybe some other organization, but we also need agreements between countries. So it's also a very important issue when we are talking about human rights. And yes, I hope that I answered the question. Thank you so much for this question.
Yeah, just to add a bit, I'm not really going to answer whether we should or we should not. Obviously, I think there must be a measurement and discussion around how we view the notion of harm against environment and whether that constitutes a harm against human rights. But what generally important around that discussion and around the idea whether we should criminalize something is I think that the more we think about it, we as society and humankind as a whole progress with our ideas on how we conceptualize human rights and how we view environment should be protected and how we view the social responsibility, organizational responsibility, and individual responsibility around that. So I think it's also important that we may have the decision to criminalize such thing, but what's more important and the secondary effect of that is the impact of that on how we as a whole progress with our ideas, progress with our opinions, and how we progress with a new conceptualization for a better future. So I do think that's going to be a very meaningful discussion to have around that subject.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? I don't see. Maybe the teams do have questions for each other? Okay, so I think we can end, but before that, the audience, will be the one that will be deciding who won the debate. However, I would like to ask you to vote not regarding your beliefs, but with which team had best arguments, better performance, and follow this, not your own beliefs, as we have their own. We will be doing by raising the hand, and we will start with the proposition team, and I can ask you, David, to help me with counting. If you can raise the hand if you believe the military security one. Okay. $19, something like that? 20? Okay, let's say 20, because I believe your count better than mine. And the environmental side. Okay. Less, so we can say that the military side, the security won. Thank you very much.